and say welcome everyone to our weekly call. Hope you've had a great weekend and are now sort of all fired up for the week ahead. So in terms of topics, and I realize I now need to reshare my screen, so let me just do that. In terms of agenda for the call, the sort of main purpose or the main focus of the call this week will be the team from the DNS Research Federation. We'll give a brief sort of intro to what the DNS Research Federation is for anyone that missed the call probably about 6 months ago now, surprisingly, where I think Emily and Lucian joined us for that, but I think there might be a couple of others from the team on the call this time round. Maybe touch on some exciting news that came out from a few days back, and then most importantly do a demo of the DAP system, which and also explain what that is as well. I know there was some interest in that from the call from last year, so I think it'd be good to have that demo. And then, as always, time permitting, I'll just sort of touch on some recent developments in the news, forthcoming events, etc., and remind you what we've got on the agenda for future topics for this call. And time permitting, we'll pick up on any other business that anyone wants to raise. So without further ado, let me stop sharing my screen. Well, I'll leave it between sort of Team Research Federation to determine who wants to do what, and hand over to you collectively. And welcome all to the call again.
Thank you, Andrew, for that introduction, and it's really great to be back presenting to this group. As you say, we had the opportunity to speak to you all. Gosh, I didn't realise it was 6 months ago, but very happy to now demonstrate the DAP. I'm just going to do a couple of words to reintroduce the DNS Research Federation to you, and yes, cover that announcement that we made this week. And then I will hand over to Lucian and the tech team, who will take you through a background to the DAP and a demonstration. So let me just advance the slide. So I'm going to do the who we are and what we're doing bit. And this is a recap really of our presentation a few months ago. What we identified as a gap that we could help to fill is that traditional internet governance and technical standards are very active communities, but the public understanding of them, or not even the public, but the understanding of them and their work and the importance of these essential technical elements of the internet is just not really as great as it should be outside of those circles. And also there is an awful lot of data available about these aspects, but the social science community, which is the community of researchers that I have most contact with, either through teaching or through my associate fellowship at Chatham House and editor of the Journal of Cyber Policy. So these are the sort of problems that we wanted to try and solve. And so we've set up a new not-for-profit in the UK, whose mission is to advance the understanding of, well, to this audience, I would say, the unique identifier system of the internet, and the impact of naming and addressing on today's cybersecurity and other hot policy issues, if you like, but also how technical standards weaves in and out of our experience of today's technology and likely experience of tomorrow's technology as well. So our three areas of activity are education and research, access to data through the DAP, which the guys are going to demonstrate for you today, and engagement in standards. we work across 3 main stakeholder groups: the research community, obviously academia, where we provide research grants, access to data, and also a lot of mentoring and support. We've been having a great time, very fulfilling time this year, working with, I think, 8 research teams from across different universities to really try and find the right data sources for their research questions, if you like, and providing that sort of level of support. Public safety also have similar requirements for data and also sense making, if you like. And industry, industry writ large is always interested in data, and here we have a collection of data that should be of interest to whether it's industry relating to the DNS or the wider industry. So this is our website at dnsrf.org, and the announcement that Andrew alluded to is that we're very proud to have secured funding from the Internet Society Foundation and RIPE NCC to help us to develop an Internet Standards Observatory that will also utilise the functionality of the DAP, and we'd be really happy to come to a future meeting and talk about that work. But that's a very exciting opportunity for us to help people understand, what's going on. We will be tracking several ITU study groups, IETF, and ETSI, looking for proposals that have an impact or could have an impact on, if you like, the integrity of the internet and those key technologies. And just a final, well, not, I think this is my second last slide. Andrew, did you want to come in on anything?
Oh, well, it's just one quick question on that.
Sure.
Conscious of a few people on the call who are responsible for research funds, amongst other things. I know you've already you've done excellently securing funding from ISOC and from RIPE, but if there are other people with sort of funds available for sort of research, are you happy to entertain additional funding to expand your funding base for the
Thank you very much. Oh no, yes, we would really welcome that. We're very fortunate to have seed funding from Meta, and our real focus for this period of opportunity that we have is to extend our funding base, to make it sustainable, to enable us to continue to do the work that we hope to outside of this period. So thanks for that shout out, Andrew. As you know, we Brits do find it difficult to talk about money, but yes, we would be very, very open to those conversations, and thanks for prompting that. This is another snapshot from our website, and what you can see here is a sort of is some widgets that are fed live from the DAP. So this gives just some clues about the functionality and the utility of the DAP, and you'll be hearing more about it from the team. And lastly, our editorial ethos is to let the data speak for itself. We're a not-for-profit. We don't have an angle. We're not a lobbying company. We are all about that sort of many topics, many views, many voices to help people understand how the internet's architecture really informs our experience of policy issues and also needs to be better understood from a variety of angles. So we did a lot of stuff last year. I will just leave it up there. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but we're funding research and doing a lot on standards and bringing people together on roundtables, and a few of you were at those, so thank you for supporting that. And this year, we're hoping to finalise a special issue open access of the Journal of Cyber Policy, to continue doing events, diversify funding, and explore deep technical collaborations. This is an area that's really opening up as people are becoming interested in the DAP. And we, again, if anybody on the call is looking at this and thinking, ooh, that would actually help me solve my problems, or help to launch a product or service that is related to our mission, we would be really, really happy to work in a deep technical collaboration, and just generally building those communities. All right, so I will leave it at that and hand over to Lucian and to Mark and Nathan.
Thank you, Emily. And if you wouldn't mind carrying on driving, I'd really appreciate that, at least until you get sick of it, and then I can try and take over. Yeah, I'm here to talk about the DAP.Live platform, the DNS Analytics Platform. Sorry, an acronym within an acronym. That's a good start. Basically, I'm going to give you an introduction to DAP.Live, what it is and how it works. I'm going to share that with my colleague Mark Robertshaw, who's our CTO at Oxford Information Labs, because otherwise you get sick of the sound of my voice. And then we'll go on to talking about querying and visualizing data, and a particular use case with Nathan Allen, our colleague, to look at DAP through the lens of examining the new rising issue of blockchain domains, or opportunity of blockchain domains. Thank you. So DAP.Live, let's have a look at the underlying technology, what problems we are trying to solve with that platform, and then Mark can take over and talk about the feature highlights that address those particular problems. So first of all, the underlying technology is basically 20 years of object-oriented software and database work that we are porting and migrating over as part of this sort of not-for-profit that we set up. We're also setting up a massive source base and various projects in open source that we call the Kinney projects. Please don't ask me why. It's sort of kinetic. It's to do with energy and sort of putting things together. But that's the brand that we've given those open source products, and we're wrapping those up in nice packaged, documented products for everybody, so that we don't sort of drag people into a sense of lock-in. We want people to feel like if they like working with DAP, if they like working with this data, they can also go off and build their own things or build more things with our help. So what problems are we trying to solve with this platform? Broadly speaking, knowledge translation, access to data, data quality, and data cost. So obviously what we mean by translation is the DNS, the IP unique identifiers are pretty much a dark art. We go around the universities, we're setting up a number of partnerships. We've just agreed with OII, Oxford University, UCL, we're still negotiating, American University, we have a partnership with. They've all got lots of students who want to write research about AI and fake news. Very few of them actually really know much at all about the DNS and IP spaces and that sort of thing. And so we're trying to bring that to life and help them understand that through and how much fun it can be exploring that through the lens of data. Obviously, there's a lot of acronyms in our game. Some of us have given up large parts of our life contributing to some of these projects. And we're trying to just help people understand what all of this means and put it together. But when we say help people, we're talking about the data consumers, the data customers of DAP.Live, who are brand watchers, public safety people, security people, academics, journalists, public servants, the business community and policy makers. They all have their own language and they all have their own understanding of the internet. Thank you. So in terms of data access, well, the problems there is that researchers that we're working with, we're aiming for the kind of spreadsheet function type level of research. Researchers are not necessarily database and SQL programmers. There are licensing challenges with these data feeds that we're accessing. We have some 60 plus data feeds that we provide from 30 plus raw data sources. They all have different use licenses, so we've got lawyers looking at that, and the platform then has to represent those needs. For example, a lot of data providers are very generous with use for academia and research and for public safety. In fact, most of them that we're talking to say we're really happy for you to use the data quite freely for that. So we have to allow a different kind of licensing for researchers than we would for commercial users, IP brand protectors, and others who are making money out of the data and would be willing to pass on some of that for costs. We're not for profit, but we also need to have some revenue return just to operate. Data access formats, we're dealing with JSON, CSV, sometimes file dumps of files in folders, bulk data and on-demand data. We have to deal with the heterogeneous nature of that data. Bulk data is rare for people, so we try and hunt that down wherever we can, because for research, bulk data is gold. And on-demand data has limited use for threat intelligence and research purposes, because you kind of have to know the results. You have to kind of know what you're searching for before you query on-demand data. So data quality, well, if we look at like the Polaris insurance industry, we've done some work in there. They kind of have a gateway, a bit like the airline travel agency industries that have gateways with standards of sharing data. That's not, you know, very well supported. It's still quite immature in this industry. There are no real taxonomies for kind of abuse categorization and data sort of labeling. So we have to look at ways to normalize that data and bring it together and make it more simple to correlate and work with. The fidelity of the data, there's not much feedback loops. A lot of the data feeds are pushing data out to the consumer of that data, and they don't know if it's any good or not. You know, a lot of domain name registrars may receive notifications of abuse on domains, and they won't agree with that. And there's no sort of standard way of notifying people. If you imagine a phishing attack is happening, where millions of people might be affected by that, it's very hard to actually talk about that. Or, you know, people are still emailing the data managers, the domain name managers, and sort of filling in forms online and that sort of thing. Finally, in research, we have to open up data not just to the researcher, but also to others for peer review. Data cost, good intelligence, the good feeds cost a lot. They're very much targeting the big players, the big providers of DNS services. And some of the most freely accessible data is actually the hardest to engineer. Data costs. Hi. Hello. Was that a question? No. Okay.
Lucien.
Okay, no worries. Data costs money in terms of security, compute, power, and storage. Getting data from the consumer victim to the analyst quickly is costly. There are good projects happening at the moment, but they're not there yet. There's, you know, a lot of we've done a recent survey at the end of last year where, you know, 90% of the consumers we surveyed just said they just don't know what to do if they're attacked, or if they get something dodgy on the phone, they just don't know how to report that. We run a domain name registrar that's our kind of playpen. We've written our own domain name registration platform, and we provide it for particularly the registrar of last resort, and for security services, and for our own sort of government customers and things like that. So we want to completely control our supply chain in that area. However, if we wanted to make money out of this, we just can't. You know, we operate 50,000 domain names. The gross margin on those at trade is 50 cents a domain name per year, which gives us a total of gross $25,000 to run a manager, a tech team, support, and operations. There's just no money for security data, for intel on those domains. You know, we have to subsidize that from other sources. Now we're doing things on our own. We're making our own income in other areas, so we can afford that. But if you want to improve the environment for the, you know, average domain name registrar, and there aren't 3 out there, it's not GoDaddy, there are thousands out there. We need to find a way of getting security intel to those registrars cheaper, quicker, faster. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Mark, who can now revisit those sorts of problems that we're trying to solve and generically talk about the feature highlights that address those problems. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Lucian, and it's really great to be with everybody today. I'm Mark, I'm the CTO of the DNS Research Federation and very much oversee the work that we do developing the DAP platform. So I'd be delighted to talk a bit about the features in more detail. So Emily, if we could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So I think at a high level, what we're trying to do with the DAP is provide what we refer to as knowledge translation. So one way of doing that is to provide lots of information very readily, and the best way is to be very visual. So dashboards are very much at the heart of how we present data to people, and especially to consumers and people at a higher level. So we have in the DAP created a number of different example dashboards showing different use cases about the range of data we have in the system. Another very important aspect of what we do, the DAP is unusual in that the data sources contained in the DAP are not necessarily entirely your run-of-the-mill data source you'd expect in this kind of system, but they've been driven very much by research requirements, and as Emily's outlined at the beginning, also standards work that we're doing. So we have a very rich and wide range of data, and very much our approach is to support our researchers and the people we're working with in a much deeper way to help them to make use of the data in a way that's going to work for them, and also present it in a way that's helpful for sort of end user consumption as well. As Lucian's alluded, we're very interested in deeper integration work, and actually having developed a very strong platform, we are very interested in ways in which that can be utilized to help people with their own systems. And some of that surrounds the fact that the DAP is a two-way platform. We'll talk about in a minute more about this, where data flows into the DAP, but also data flows out as well. So we're very interested in the sort of connections between our system and other systems in a sort of two-way connective scenario. And of course, we are developers at heart as well. We're technical people. We're not using off-the-shelf platform here. So we're very familiar with developing systems that integrate, but also doing bespoke development for people as their needs arise in ways which complement the work we do on the DAP. So that hopefully gives a sort of headline about what we're trying to do. In terms of how we approach data, we're very into sort of consolidation of data. We normalize our data into base standards, taxonomies. We look for ways in which we can deduplicate data and simplify data, so data is very easily consumed by people using the system, and also there's consistent sort of namings for things, and things work in a consistent way. Likewise, in terms of the way data flows into our system, we have data that we provide, which we're going to show you some of that a bit later on, but also there's an ability to bring your own data into the system as well, which often we find is the best way for people to work. Often people find that they've got data that they have on their system or off system, which they want to either enrich with our data or use to seed data in our system for more elaborate querying and analysis of the data. So having the ability to actually bring your own data is a really key part of our system, as well as the data we provide. As we've mentioned, the visualization side of what we do is important. We have a wide range of charts, graphs, and visualizations, which my colleague will show you in a demonstration part a bit later on. And as mentioned, the feedback loop coming back out of the system is facilitated by this idea of API connections, which allow you as a user of the DAP to create your own integrations with our system, so that you can connect very easily using sort of developer tools with data contained within the DAP. And that's all managed with granular access control. And we've built our system very much secure first, so that everything is very, very locked down. So if you bring your own data to the party, the default behavior is that will be locked to your account, and even down to the project level within our system. So it's very secure, and the sharing is not the default option here, but we have designed it for to be very safe. And that also applies to the way in which we work with data which we ingest from third parties as well. We work very much within the constraints of how they allow us to use their data, and the impacts that has when we work in a commercial environment, as well as with our researchers and us, and working in standards as well. So we have designed to be very effective in those different scenarios. In terms of data quality, we've mentioned already that we're looking to promote standards that affects the way in which we encode data and we report upon data. We look to do that in a very consistent manner. We're looking at, where possible, having redundant data feeds. So we're not just reliant upon one particular provider for a certain type of data, but where multiple providers exist in the market, we're looking to go out and get a hybridity of data, and therefore we can provide what we see as a much more consolidated, hopefully, I guess, more objective view of data, which isn't coloured by one particular provider there. And I think one thing that's our big passion for us is the ability to actually close the loop as well. So as well as just providing data, putting it out there, we're also keen to sort of hear back from the community we're working with and actually look to measure whether what we're providing in terms of data is effective. So we're looking at increasingly ways in which we can close that feedback loop and provide means to receive sort of feedback back from our users as well. Going forward into 2023, 2024, we're looking at involving a lot more machine learning in what we do and improving the analytical side of what we do to be much more about finding patterns within data rather than just simply the classic ways of approaching data. And of course, research is driving a lot of what we do in terms of the tool itself, which has been great. In terms of how we sort of looking to package what we do and the sort of way in which things work, we, as Lucian's mentioned, we work very much with open source tools. We've ourselves open sourced a lot of the core of what we've produced in the DAP platform. I would say probably over 75% of that platform is open source effectively. And in terms of the way in which we're looking to fund the platform is we're looking very much for sort of donors and sponsors. And I think Emily mentioned earlier, we're very happy to receive any sorts of grants and funding to help us with what we're doing. And being a not-for-profit, we're very interested in being able to provide data as much as we can for free or for as cheap as we possibly can or for at cost. And we're not looking to sort of, for it to be a big, we're hoping to be able to do that as much as we can. We are operating a multiple tier model at the moment. So we're looking for people to join us at one of 3 different tiers. We've got an offer at the moment, an accredited tier and a partner tier and a premium partner tier with different sort of levels of cost. And in terms of that, the access system will then be varied. There'll be more access to data on the higher tiers with less access to data on the lower tiers. But as we mentioned, it's very much about cost recovery here and not necessarily about sort of making lots of profits. Another important part of what we do is that we're interested as well in unique data sources where data doesn't already exist on the market. And we're tapping into different aspects of the DNS which maybe haven't been properly wrapped up at the moment and looking at ways in which we can produce feeds that are unique and add value to the market as well as just repackaging other people's data as well. And obviously the way that we're operating with providers is we end up with lots of bulk purchasing. We're buying data a lot in bulk. We're working with lots of different people, and therefore we benefit from the discounts by doing things in that sort of a way. And as Lucian's mentioned already, we're already working with 60+ feeds in our system at this point in time. Okay, just to highlight again the mentioned earlier on about bringing your own data, we see this as one of the real key selling points of the platform really is the ability to bring your own data in and merge that with the data we provide. There's lots of ways in which that can be really useful for seeding data in our own system, but also to be able to, I guess, enrich data that's out there in your own platforms, but also for people to feel they can safely bring their data into our platform and for it to be analysed using our own toolkit in a way that works well. I think finally, just to mention that that we have, I think just if you go forward, Emily, yeah, there's a couple of examples of just to say about the data cost as well, that actually using consolidated tools is probably the last thing to mention, actually reduces the cost of analysis, because actually we've got a set of tools in the DAP that give us out of the box ways of analysing things in consolidated ways. That sort of finishes that talk about the analysis. And here's a few examples of the presentation of how our system works. So this is a good example of a dashboard. Nathan's going to actually show this one interactively in a minute in his demo. You can see that we have a range of different tools we can use, tables and charts. You can see here's an example of what actually a dashboard that one of our users built for themselves. And actually the platform is very easy to use and to create your own dashboards. And here's the one that we like to show at the end, because it's actually a dashboard that we use in our own office and have a copy on our own wall as well of this. You can see the example here where we see this data, which actually gives us information about the operation of the DAP for our own internal benefits. So I hope that's given you a flavour for the DAP in terms of the feature sets. And I'm happy to take any questions before handing over to my colleague Nathan for a demo. So any questions from the call before we move on?
I can see a question from Vicky in the chat about working with DNS OARC. I know the OARC team have got quite a lot of data. I don't know if any of you want to comment on that at all?
I can just do a quick one on that, Andrew. Yes, I mean, we know the OARC guys really well. We've reached out to them and look forward to chatting with them and working collaboratively with them as they're able to and have time to engage with us. So really keen to engage with anybody doing complementary work. I think that our community, you know, we have a very complementary group, if you like, because the DNS OARC, as I understand it, would be to people who are more technically confident, whereas our offering is really aimed towards primarily the social science research community to really help to drive evidence-based policy making. But we know Dinesh and Keith all very well, so I'm hopeful for strong engagement going forward.
Thank you. And Peter, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, it just looks amazing as always. So I've seen it before, but I was curious what updates have happened in the last 6 months or so. Now that you kind of officially launched, have there been any features added, or is it just bug fixing, stabilization, that kind of thing?
So I can take that one. It's been largely about preparing for our sort of official launch, which has been happened obviously in the last couple of weeks. But there have been a few new features. So the analysis tools have strengthened a bit. We've got a few more transformations online in analysis tools, that kind of thing, and a few more dashboard widgets I think have come online. But I think the most significant development probably in terms of platform is the amount of data in the platform, and actually the number of feeds has increased substantially since we last spoke to you, Pete. I know a few months ago. So I think that's probably been the focus, to stabilize the platform, but also to ensure that we've got as much data as we can flowing through the platform.
Cool.
I think I'd only add to that two huge rounds of security. You know, we have a target on our back, so we've been through 2 big projects to really nail that on both sides, both the back-end DAP system and on the front-end website as well.
I hope that wasn't too stressful.
Well, yeah, we work with a very good external pen tester who we actually very much enjoy working with. He's very comprehensive, and actually having gone through a few rounds with him, we've learned to enjoy the experience. So yeah, the opposite of stressful. Actually, it's really
some sort of Stockholm syndrome going on here, or is it just
probably in fairness? Yeah.
A bit like learning to love your dentist.
Yeah, right, I see. Right.
You know, it's good for you.
Yeah.
Okay, is that a good cue then to perhaps take us into the demo? With,
it is, yes. So let me go ahead and share for you. So hi everyone, hopefully you can see my screen. I'm Nathan Allen. I'm the Senior Software Engineer here at Oxford Information Labs and the DNS Research Federation. What I'm going to do is go through a quick use case of the system to demonstrate some of the data that we have available on the system. So the first thing I'll do is just show you some of the blockchain data that we have, seeing as how that's the data that I'm going to use to help illustrate what you can do on the system. Blockchain data is fairly new to us. We've recently ingested some feeds from a number of different providers, one of which being directly from the Ethereum naming service itself. And we also have an API feed provided to us from Unstoppable on the domain names that they are currently managing. So in total, we have about 6.2 million blockchain domains that have been registered across those providers. That spans 15 different TLDs across 3 different blockchains itself. The system itself will go away and get new data around about every 15 minutes or so from these providers. So we have a very real and up-to-date measure of what's happening in the blockchain space. If I come now to the homepage of the system, again, some of you may have seen this in other demos and things that we've done, but this is the homepage of the DAP. It's very much where you would kick off things. So you have quick overviews as to the data feeds that the DAP provides you as inputs to the system. So if we go into there, we can see that we have a number of different feeds. As Lucian said, we have about 60 or so feeds, and they're broken down into different categories. So we have data ranging from blockchain to the DNS to malware, phishing, scam, spam, whois, and website information. So a real wide variety of data that's available to you. If I filter on the blockchain data, seems like that's where I'm going to take this demonstration. We can see that we have a number of different sources, some from Unstoppable, some from Ethereum directly itself. We also have a combined data feed. So this is where we've taken all of the blockchain records from both Ethereum and from Unstoppable and combined them into one feed. So if we go into the system to see that data, we can see that we have, this is our data set editor, where you can perform a number of different transformations and functions on the data that's provided to you. So obviously this is a set of over 6 million records, so we want to try and make some sense of this. So one of the first things you might want to consider doing is to filter this down to a more relevant set. Interestingly enough, the blockchain data set is quite an interesting set, not least because you're allowed to pretty much register whatever you want in terms of character sets. So you'll see things that have got spaces, you'll see things that have got emojis and all kinds of characters. So to make searching slightly easier, we've created a Unicode field so that the database can handle querying that a little bit easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for all the domains, for example, that contain the word Google. So we'll go ahead and we'll apply that. And we've got a set come back already. Those of you with eagle eyes will notice that we may have a couple of duplicates here. But in fact, if we go along to the raw value, you'll notice that there's been a couple of registrations where there's been spaces included in the prefix of the domain name itself. So some interesting data points that's worth bringing to your attention there. So filtering on the system, you can adjust the columns. So if you're not interested in all of the data that's come back, we may only be interested in the domain name itself, the naming service that's used, and the registrant ID. You can go ahead and update those and have a reduced set. You can perform additional formula onto the data set, so you can create additional columns based on the values and calculations that you may want to perform. As Marcus said, you can join in other data. So if you want to start with a list of brands that you've curated yourself, you could at this point join in that list to narrow down the list even further. And you can perform additional summarizations, which for those of you with a SQL programming background, that's similar to a group by expression, where you can summarize and group data by specific key points. So coming back out of the system again, that's kind of an overview of the DAP data feeds, the data coming into the system that we provide, the different categories of data that's available. As we mentioned, you can import your own data, you can bring your own data. You can do that in two forms. The first form is a tabular data source, which is very much like a spreadsheet where you can import data in table format, so with columns and rows. At this point, you can upload a CSV if you have a file to make things a bit quicker for you. The other way that you can import data is via a document. And this has been used for a lot of the standards work that we've been doing on the DAP, where we've needed to upload a lot of the documents from the different study groups from ITU and IETF, where we will then extract all of the text from those documents, analyze the words and phrases, and then be able to produce reports based on the content of those documents, which is part of the work that we're doing with ISOC. At any point in time, you can, once you've been playing with the system in terms of generating queries, you can save them so that you can come back to them at any point. And any time that you go back into them, they'll be exactly where you left off, and it will query, it will re-query wherever you are in real time, so you get live results back into the system again. So that's kind of explains the inputs to the system, how you can analyze your data. And then briefly, I'll just touch on dashboards and how you can go about creating those. as a point of contact, we provide some example or shared dashboards with every account. One of those is the blockchain dashboard that I showed you at the very start, but we also have a domain summary dashboard and a malware and phishing activity dashboard that illustrate some of the data points that we have within the system. Just to cover the final step of actually going ahead and creating a dashboard, clicking on Add New Dashboard will take you to the dashboard canvas area where you can create and drag on any widgets and items that you want in order to create your dashboard. So it's as simple as dragging on an item and then going ahead and clicking Configure. So for this example, I'll just go ahead and select some data that I've imported into the system. We can see, this contains a very simple list, but at the point where you drag on a widget to the dashboard, you configure, you tell it which data set or source or stored query you want to use, and it will then display your data in the dashboard. You can do the same for pie charts and line charts and anything else that you might need. There, we also have a free-form option for you. So if there's something that you can't find in terms of formatting or the way that it looks or feels, we do offer by the template widget the opportunity to enter your own HTML and interact directly with the data that's available. And that's, again, a lot of the ways that we work in terms of presenting data that I showed you in the blockchain dashboard. But in the interest of time, I'll stop there and be very happy to try and answer any questions that any of you might have.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Nathan, and colleagues. I see there's a few questions. Well, there's a debate in the chat, probably a better way of putting it. I'm not sure if there are any unanswered questions in there. Perhaps anyone that thinks they don't have an answered question in the chat, perhaps if you might want to raise your hand, and equally anyone that's got any other questions or comments for the Research Federation team. Again, do you want to use the Zoom tool under reactions, raise your virtual hand and unmute, and you can sort of come on and ask. So anyone got any comments, questions or other observations?
So can I just, as I guess a point to some of the comments in the chat, it's probably worth saying that a lot of the data that we have, is particularly around blockchain data, has come about as a result of researchers doing research on the blockchain. And so we don't have blockchain data because we're trying to advocate the use of it, or we're trying to steer people toward registering blockchain domains. It's simply there because we have researchers who are trying to understand this space, its pros and its cons and its downfalls and so on and so forth. And it kind of alludes back to what Mark and Emily were saying about, we just want to help provide access to data to people, and let them tell their story and let them use the data for their own research purposes. So hopefully that kind of answers some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah. And I've posted a link for anyone that's not completely up to date with the alt special use top level domain draft from the ITF. I think draft 20 came out a couple of days ago, so that I think will be on the DNS Ops agenda in Japan at the end of the month. I can see Eric's got a question in the chat about the is DAP.Live limited to web query interface, or is API access available? And if API, how do you restrict what researchers, customers can do with the data?
Yes, that's a really good question, Eric. And absolutely, we do provide an API. And in fact, it's a very flexible API in that you can effectively create your own endpoints within the system and bind that to a query that you've modeled using the GUI as Nathan's shown and demonstrated. You can even parameterize those queries if you want to. In terms of the access to data, what I would say is that we're very careful about how we grant access data to people on the system. In terms of commercial users, they have a very limited access anyway within licensing constraints of the data we have. For researchers, we work again to very very strong agreements with them, and we do monitor and work with them in terms of which data they are exposing publicly out of the system. And typically we find researchers prefer to work often on the system anyway, so it's more manageable. But where they are taking data off the system, we are very much involved in that process. So hopefully that answers your question about that.
And if not, Eric, oh yes, it looks like it does. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Anyone else got any either new questions or unanswered questions from the thoughts around blockchain domains?
If I may, Andrew, I'd just like to come in. I've been trying to answer some of the questions in the chat. We sort of thought blockchain domains might be an interesting and quirky use case to bring to this group. But it's clearly a highly controversial topic, and we're really aware of that. I'd just echo what Nathan says. You know, is actually our interest in tracking blockchain domains has come from a research project, and also it's, you know, I've been racking my brains as somebody, you know, speaking very personally, who struggles with the whole idea of why anybody would want this or what the use of them is. You know, the big question is, what do they give you that regular domains don't, and are they going to be a thing? And those are things that researchers, I hope, will help to cast some light on.
Thanks. Yeah, yes, there's a continuing skepticism on that, but yeah, as you made clear, you're not advocating for their use, you're simply researching into their use such that it is. Fine. Last chance for any sort of questions that anyone may have. Otherwise, you got the opportunity. Are you happy to share the slides post-call, Emily and Lucian? Yep. Fine. Okay. So I'll circulate those to everyone after the call, and I think they had your email details on there. So if anyone wants to reach out to you directly with either additional questions or offers of additional funding, etc., they can pursue those with you directly. And obviously, the usual 10% commission applies.
Thank you, Andrew. Checks in the post. And
we said 5.
There is also a join us form on the website, which now works since we launched at Morg meeting, and it's nice to see Joe and a couple of others who were at the meeting on the call today. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to highlight the DAP and its functionality. We would be very thrilled if anybody on this call wanted to open an account and explore the data themselves.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, thank you for the demo, and no doubt the debate on blockchain domain names will continue, but hopefully also additional questions on DAP as well. So fantastic. Well, thank you for that. You're welcome, as always, to stay on or not. If you've got other things to do, either is fine. Let me just, conscious of the time, we've got sort of roughly 5 minutes left, so I'll just go back to sharing my screen just briefly and roll through just a quick reminder. Few headlines from the last week. We've obviously covered the first one on the Research Federation's Internet Standards Observatory, as Emily touched on at the start. Also, I think Dan highlighted this to me, so thank you for that, Dan. The IAB M10 workshop, Management Techniques for Encrypted Networks. The report was published a few days ago, is now available. This is from the workshop back in October of last year. So those of you that are interested in ways to improve network management techniques in support of even broader adoption of encryption on the internet, the report is there for you to read. The sort of legal case between Quad9 and Sony Music continues, and there's an update from Quad9 on there, as well as thoughts from the Echo Industry Association. I have reached out to John Todd, who many of you on this call know, to see if he or one of the Quad9 team want to join the call next week to comment on that. So he may well do so. I only asked him today, so he hasn't replied yet, as it's still early morning for him. I think the last one that I mentioned just on there, which came up last week as well, is there's a DNS hackathon at RIPE, just before RIPE 86 in Rotterdam in May. Details of which are now accessible on the RIPE site or from the URL currently on the screen. So that may well catch the interest of some of you as well. Okay, just moving on. The only thing that I'll mention on here, on this next slide from other stuff that's come up, the ITF quotes final agenda for ITF 116 is now available. I say quotes final because it's always subject to change, but it is now published. With a few tweaks from the draft agenda from a week's back, and be remiss of me not to mention that we do have a side meeting on encrypted client Hello scheduled, which is between 8:30 and 9:30 on Tuesday, 28th March. Zoom access will also be available if you're not present in person in Yokohama, or indeed you are present but don't fancy emerging from your hotel room at 8:30 in the morning. Okay, I'll skip over the other things in the interest of time. There's a few calls for papers and workshop proposals still open, including, unsurprisingly, for RIPE 86. Is probably the next pressing deadline in a week's or this coming Sunday. So if you've got any thoughts of papers for RIPE 86, you just be putting those together quite quickly. And then finally, from me, reminder, we've got sort of a few topics coming up over the next few weeks, not least of which Peter Lowe will be talking about DNS abuse techniques, which was mentioned in passing earlier. So Peter will be sort of touching on that, sharing thoughts on behalf of FIRST, where you may recall he's the ambassador for DNS abuse, or not actually for DNS abuse, but the topic. He's not advocating for it, clearly. And we got a few things just waiting to schedule, not least of which I should have a date quite shortly for the DNS Crypt protocol update, for those of you with an interest in learning more about that, and hopefully the plans to have an RFC finally for DNS Crypt, given it's been around for a few years now, just to add that to the pantheon of available encrypted DNS options with an actual standard behind them. So that's everything from me. We've got a minute or so for any other business. I see Eric asked the question, is remote participation available for the RIPE hackathon? I don't know if it is. I don't know if anyone on this call knows that. Otherwise I can find out afterwards, but if anyone does, be good to know. If you have a point of view on that, let me stop sharing. And equally, does anyone have any other business that you want to raise? Because now's a chance to do that if you do. Either put it in the chat or raise your virtual hand in the last 30 seconds or so of the call. I'm not seeing any virtual hands raised currently. I see there's some disappointment expressed that Peter hasn't yet solved DNS abuse, which you must work harder, Peter. That's pretty shocking, really.
I'm the ambassador for DNS abuse.
You are?
Yes.
Fair enough. Well, you're doing a fantastic job then, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, we're all very proud.
Thank you for encouragement. Thank you.
Right, well, that cherry note, I think we probably ought to draw a line under the call then. So Emily, Lucian and colleagues, thank you for the presentation, update and demo, and very well done on securing that first funding. Lots of progress over the last few months. Have a fantastic week, everyone, and look forward to catch up to learn all about Peter's successes in driving up DNS abuse this time next week. So catch you all then. Bye all.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks.